The socialism of the heresies. During the Middle Ages and the period of the Reformation, doctrines of chileastic socialism often fomented broad popular movements in Western Europe. Such a situation did not obtain in antiquity, when these ideas were expressed by individual thinkers or within narrow groups. As a result of this evolution, the socialist doctrines, in turn, acquired new and extremely important traits, which they have preserved to this day. The survey below provides a very general and schematic overview of the development of socialist ideas in this epoch. In order to compensate somewhat for the abstract character of the presentation and to help make more concrete the atmosphere in which these ideas arose, we introduce, in the appendix following the general survey, 3 biographies of eminent representatives of the chileastic socialism of the period. In the subsequent section, an attempt is made to delineate the ideological framework within which the doctrines of chileastic socialism developed. 1. General survey. Beginning with the Middle Ages and the Reformation, doctrines of chileastic socialism in Western Europe appeared under religious guise. As varied as they were, all these doctrines had in common a characteristic trait: the rejection of numerous aspects of the teachings of the Catholic Church and a fierce hatred for the Church itself. As a result, they developed largely within the framework of the heretical movements. Below we shall review several characteristic medieval heresies. Cathars. The movement of the Cathars, Greek for the pure, spread in Western and Central Europe in the 11th century. It seems to have originated in the East, arriving from Bulgaria, the home of Bogomil heresy in the preceding century. The ultimate origins of both, however, are more ancient. Among the Cathars there were many different groups. Pope Innocent III counted as many as 40 Cathar sects. In addition, there existed other sects that had many doctrinal points in common with the Cathars. Among the best known were the Albigenses. They are all usually categorized as Gnostic or Manichaean heresies. In order to avoid unnecessary complexity, we shall describe the beliefs and notions common to all groups, without specifying the relative importance that a particular view might have in a given sect. For a more detailed account, see 9 volume I, 10, and 11. The basic contention in all branches of the movement was the belief in the irreconcilable contradiction between the physical world, seen as the source of evil, and the spiritual world, seen as the essence of good. The so-called dualistic Cathars believed this to be caused by the existence of 2 gods, one good, the other evil. It was the god of evil who had created the physical world, the earth with everything that grows upon it, the sky, the sun and the stars, and human bodies as well. The good God, on the other hand, was seen as the creator of the spiritual world, in which there is another, spiritual sky, other stars and another sun. Other Cathars, called Monarchian Cathars, believed in one beneficent God, the creator of the universe, but assumed that the physical world was the creation of his eldest, fallen son Satan or Lucifer. All the Cathars held that the mutual hostility of the realms of matter and spirit allowed for no intermingling. They therefore denied the bodily incarnation of Christ, asserting that his body was a spiritual one, which had only the appearance of physicality, and the resurrection of the flesh. They saw a reflection of their dualism in the division of the Holy Scriptures into Old and New Testaments. They identified the God of the Old Testament, the creator of the physical world, with the evil God or with Lucifer. They professed the New Testament as the teaching of the good God. The Cathars did not believe that God had created the world from nothing. They held that matter was eternal and that the world would have no end. So far as people were concerned, they considered their bodies to be the creation of the evil force. Their souls, though, did not have a single source. The souls of the majority of men, just like their bodies, were begotten by evil. Such people had no hope for salvation and were doomed to perish when the entire material world returned to a state of primeval chaos. But the souls of some men had been created by the good God. These were the angels led into temptation by Lucifer and thus imprisoned in earthly bodies. As a result of changing into a series of bodies, Cathars believed in the transmigration of souls. They were destined to end up in their sex so as to receive liberation from the prison of matter. The ultimate goal and the ideal of all mankind was in principle universal suicide. This was conceived either as in the most direct sense, we shall encounter the practical realization of this view later, or through ceasing to bear children. These views determined the attitude toward both sin and salvation. The Cathars denied the existence of freedom of will. The doomed children of evil could not avoid their fate. But those who were initiated into the highest rank of the sect could no longer sin. The stringent rules to which members had to subject themselves were justified by the danger of being defiled by sinful matter. Non-observance of these rules merely indicated that the initiation had been invalid, since either the initiates or those who had initiated them did not possess angelic souls. Before initiation, no restrictions of any kind were placed on behavior. The only real sin was the fall of the angels in heaven, everything else was considered to be an inevitable consequence. After initiation, neither repentance for sins committed nor their expiation was considered necessary. The Cathars' attitude toward life followed consistently from their view that evil permeated the physical world. Propagation of the species was considered Satan's work. Cathars believed that a pregnant woman was under the influence of demons and that every child born was accompanied by a demon. Hence the prohibition against eating meat and against anything that came from sexual union. The same tendency led to a complete avoidance of social involvement. Secular power was considered to be the creation of the evil god and hence not to be submitted to, nor were they to become involved in legal proceedings, the taking of oaths, or the carrying of arms. Anyone using force was considered a murderer, be he soldier or judge. It follows that participation in many areas of life was completely closed to the Cathars. Moreover, many considered that any contact whatever with people outside the sect was a sin, with the exception of attempts to proselytize. All Cathars were united in their hatred of the Catholic Church. They regarded it not as the Church of Jesus Christ but as the Church of sinners, the whore of Babylon. The Pope was held to be the source of all error and priests considered sophists and Pharisees. In the opinion of the Cathars, the fall of the Church had taken place in the time of Constantine the Great and Pope Sylvester, when the Church had violated the commandments of Christ by encroaching upon secular power. They denied the sacraments, particularly the baptism of children, since they were too young to believe, but matrimony and communion as well. Some branches of the movement systematically plundered and defiled churches. In 1225, Cathars burned down a Catholic crutch in Brescia. In 1235, they killed the Bishop of Mantua. A certain Ian de la Toile, head of a Manichaean sect, 1143 to 1148, proclaimed himself the Son of God and the Lord of everything on earth. In this capacity, he called upon his followers to plunder churches. The Cathars hated the cross in particular, considering it to be a symbol of the evil god. As early as about 1000 AD, a certain Luddard, preaching near Chalons, called for the smashing of crosses and religious images. In the 12th century, Pierre de Bruys made bonfires of broken crosses, until finally he himself was burned by an angry mob. The Cathars considered churches to be heaps of stones and divine services mere pagan rites. They rejected religious images, denied the intercession of the saints and the efficacy of prayer for the departed. A book by the Dominican Inquisitor Rainier Sacani, himself a heretic for 17 years, states that the Cathars were not forbidden to plunder churches. Although the Cathars rejected the Catholic hierarchy and the sacraments, they had a hierarchy and sacraments of their own. The basic division of the sect was into two groups: the perfect, perfecti, and the faithful, credenti. The former were few in number, Rainier counted only 4,000 in all, but they constituted the select group of the sect leaders. The clergy was drawn from the perfecti, and only they were privy to all the doctrines of the sect. Many extreme views that were radically opposed to Christianity were unknown to the ordinary faithful. Only the perfecti were obliged to observe the many prohibitions. In particular, they were not allowed to deny their faith under any circumstances. In case of persecution, they were to accept a martyr's death. The faithful, on the other hand, were allowed to go to regular church for form's sake and, when persecuted, to disavow the faith. In compensation for the rigors imposed on the perfecti, their position was far higher than that occupied by Catholic priests. In certain respects, the perfecti were as gods themselves, and the faithful worshipped them accordingly. The faithful were obliged to support the perfecti. One of the important rites of the sect was that of submission, in which the faithful performed a threefold prostration before the perfecti. The perfecti had to renounce marriage, and they literally did not have the right to touch a woman. They could not possess any property and were obliged to devote their whole lives to service of the sect. They were forbidden to keep a permanent dwelling of any kind and were required to spend their lives in constant travel or to stay in special secret sanctuaries. The consecration of the perfecti, the consolation, consolamentum, was the central sacrament of the sect. This rite cannot be compared to anything in the Catholic Church. It combined baptism, or confirmation, ordination, confession, absolution, and sometimes supreme unction as well. Only those who received it could count on being freed from the captivity of the body and having their souls returned to their celestial abode. The majority of the Cathars had no hope of fulfilling the strict commandments that were obligatory for the perfecti and intended, rather, to receive consolation on their deathbed. This was called the good end. The prayer to grant the good end under the care of the good people, the perfecti, was recited together with the Lord's Prayer. Sometimes, having received consolation, a sick person recovered. He was then usually advised to commit suicide, called indura. In many cases, indura was in fact a condition for receiving consolation. Not infrequently, the aged or the very young who had received consolation were subjected to indura-i.e., in effect, murdered. There were various forms of indura. Most frequently it was by starvation, especially for children, whom the mothers simply stopped suckling, bleeding, hot baths followed by sudden chilling, drinking of liquid mixed with ground glass and strangulation were also used. Idalinger, who studied the extant archives of the Inquisition in Toulouse and Carcassonne, writes, quote, "Whoever examines the records of the above-mentioned courts attentively will have no doubt that far more people perished from the indura, some voluntarily, some forcibly, than as a result of the Inquisition's verdicts." End quote. These basic notions were the source of the socialist doctrines disseminated among the Cathars. They rejected property as belonging to the material world. The perfecti were forbidden to have any personal belongings, but as a group they controlled the holdings of the sect, which often were considerable. Cathars enjoyed influence in various segments of society, including the highest strata. Thus it is said that Count Raymond VI of Toulouse always kept in his retinue Cathars disguised in ordinary attire, so they could bless him in case of impending death. For the most part, however, the preaching of the Cathars apparently was directed to the urban lower classes, as indicated in particular by the names of various sects, Populicani, i.e., populists, although certain historians see this name as a corruption of Polycians, Pifflers, derived from plebs, Texans, weavers, etc. In their sermons, the Cathars preached that a true Christian life was possible only on the condition that property was held in common. In 1023, a group of Cathars were put on trial in Monteforte, charged with promulgating celibacy and communality of property and with attacking the accepted religious traditions. It seems that the appeal for communality of property was rather widespread among the Cathars, since it is mentioned in certain Catholic works directed against them. In one of these, for instance, Cathars are accused of demagogically proclaiming this principle while not adhering to it themselves, quote, "You do not have everything in common. Some have more, others less." End quote. Celibacy among the perfecti and the general condemnation of marriage are common to all Cathars. But in a number of cases, only marriage is considered sinful, not promiscuity outside marriage. It should be recalled that "thou shalt not commit adultery" was considered to be a commandment of the god of evil. By the same token, these prohibitions had as their aim not so much mortification of the flesh as destruction of the family. In the writings of contemporaries, the Cathars are constantly accused of free or holy love, and of having wives in common. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, between 1130 and 1150, accused the Cathars of preaching against marriage while cohabiting with women who had abandoned their families. 10, p. 16, Ranier supports this contention. The same accusation against a Manichaean sect that was making inroads into Brittany around 1145 can be found in the Chronicle of Hugo Damiens, Archbishop of Rouen. A book against heresies by Alain de Lille, which was published in the 12th century, ascribed the following view to the Cathars, quote, "Marital bonds are contrary to the laws of nature, since these laws demand that everything be held in common." End quote. The Cathar heresy swept over Europe with extraordinary swiftness. In 1012, a sect of Cathars is recorded in Mainz, in 1018 and again in 1028 in Aquitaine, in 1022 in Orleans, in 1025 in Arras, in 1028 in Monteforte, near Turin, in 1030 in Burgundy, in 1051 in Goslar, etc. Around 1190, Bonacersus, who had previously been a bishop with the Cathars, wrote of the situation in Italy, quote, "Are not all townships, cities, and castles overrun with these pseudo-prophets?" End quote. And in 1166, the Bishop of Milan asserted that there were more heretics than faithful in his diocese. One work from the 13th century enumerates 72 Cathar bishops. Ranier Sacchini speaks of 16 churches of Cathars. They were all closely associated and apparently headed up by a Cathar pope, who was located in Bulgaria. Councils were called, which were attended by representatives from numerous countries. For example, in 1167, a council was openly held in St. Felix near Toulouse. It was summoned by the heretical Pope Nystus and was attended by a host of heretics, including some from Bulgaria and Constantinople. The heresy was particularly successful in the south of France, in Languedoc and Provence. Missions for conversion of the heretics were repeatedly sent there, one of which included St. Bernard of Clairvaux, who reported that churches were deserted and that no one took communion or was baptized. The missionaries and the local Catholic clergy were assaulted and subjected to threats and insults. The nobles of southern France supported the sect actively, seeing an opportunity to acquire church lands. For more than 50 years Languedoc was under the control of the Cathars and seemed lost to Rome forever. A papal legate, Pierre de Castelnau, was killed by heretics. The Pope announced several crusades against the Cathars. The first of these failed because of support given to the heretics by the local nobility. It was only in the 13th century, after more than 30 years of the Guerres Albigeoises, that the heresy was suppressed. However, the influence of these sects continued to be felt for several centuries.